Welcome to Firm, folks. Mark Merrill. We got three candidates that we're going to cover over a period of the next couple of days, 48, maybe into 72 hours. We do apologize for being away. We've been dealing with a little bit of a health issue, as you can probably see, but we are better and ready and raring to go. Thank you for all of your support. Let's get started, or back on track, as we should say, as you can see before you here. The three candidates we are going to cover in the period of that number of hours is Graham Platner, as you see here, number one. Number two will be Bobby Charles, one of the candidates for governor, and Susan Collins, who's been in the news lately about her cognitive health. But we uncover here at Firm, folks, the real truth of the Graham Platner campaign and get the facts from gubernatorial candidate Bobby Charles versus the accusations of the Bangor Daily News, and as we said, Susan Collins on her cognitive health media concerns to continue to serve in the U.S. Senate. So let's get this over with, shall we? It's been hard enough on the American citizens, never mind the state of Maine. Now, from the interview files of WVOM Radio's Maine Morning News recently comes a fresh and honest perspective of Steve Robinson, Maine Wire editor-in-chief, and details on Platner's attitude, effects on voters, and what that could mean to you folks and the entire state of Maine if he's elected. Here's just part of that interview that took place recently on WVOM Radio along with host Rick Tyler, which starts things off.
We want to ask you our question of the day because we know that at least one political action committee has already launched, it was a 15-second ad attacking Graham Platner, ostensibly on behalf of Susan Collins, not on behalf of Janet Mills. But what we've learned so far is at least those political attack ads, digging up the Reddit posts, digging up some of his comments and the tattoo, it didn't work on at least primary voters, or at least those responding to polls. Do we think that the ads, which are going to have to come now a month early, are going to work on moderate voters and get to dissuade them to support the socialists in November?
Well, I actually think that the nature of political advertising has changed a little bit. 15, 20 years ago, you had three media markets in Maine, and if you bought three TV stations and a couple of radio stations, you could get your message in front of 75, 85% of all registered voters in the state. So you could actually test the message like, hey, Graham Platner says the woman who got raped had it coming to him. And most people, by the time you put a poll in the field, would have heard that message. Nowadays, media consumption is so fractured. There's a percentage of people getting their news from Snapchat, some from Facebook, some from Hulu, or watching their programming on Hulu or Amazon or Netflix. So everything is so fractured that I don't think that you have the same ability to get a attack ad out into the general political consciousness and then poll to see its impact. So that's what I think you're seeing, the inability of both Mills and the early Collins-aligned ads to make a dent in some of the polling, I think is a product of how fractured media consumption is these days. So I think any campaign that's going to try to have effective political messaging of the negative variety, or even really of the positive variety, is going to have a multivariate approach. Of course, they're going to want to lean into advertising on WVOM, the highest rated radio station in the state. That's where they get the most voters, but you're also going to have to look at multiple digital platforms as well.
Like the Maine Wire online at themainewire.com.
Exactly. So while we're pumping our own tires,
exactly.
Most influential media in the state. But I think that you're going to have to get creative with your advertising, especially if you're trying to reach voters under the age of 30. Show me a voter under the age of 30 who's opened up a newspaper or watched the evening news. The media consumption has totally changed. And I think that the Platner campaign, with some experience electing my commie former peer at Bowdoin, Mamdani, I think that they've got a little bit of experience with that youth-targeted messaging. messaging, and that's something that Senator Collins is going to have to adopt. I said before, I'm not ever going to give advice to Senator Collins on winning elections in Maine because she's the indisputed champ of kicking Democrat teeth in when it comes to Maine elections, but she might have to adopt some digital marketing and some new media techniques if she wants to compete with Platner, because you can bet that he's going to have, a digital army. Those little kids in the Philippines are going to be typing away on Twitter and Blue Sky and Facebook, and he's going to have a strong digital presence, even if it's not real.
Well, that's just a brief excerpt, folks, from that interview of Steve Robinson of the Maine Wire on WVOM radio recently about the media and how it has changed over the years, indeed, to benefit candidates like Graham Platner. Well, I think that remains to be seen, folks. We'll find out. We don't have to worry about June 9th anymore as far as the U.S. Senate race, with Janet Mills, of course, resigning, suspending her campaign, as she puts it. But now, Maine citizens and civil-minded voters, here's some extra additional background information on Mr. Platner that might help you and younger voters, especially those of you out there voting for the first time in a Senate election or general election altogether. So, Graham Platner's excuse doesn't match the timeline. His past is all over the news. All of it verified. CNN, believe it or not, Washington Post, Jewish Insider, multiple outlets, and we have a couple of others right here that are quite a bit reliable, more reliable than what you've heard. But Platner's excuse is PTSD, isolation, darkness after leaving the military. In 2013, rape comments that he made. He was 28 at the time. We at Firm don't really care that much about that, folks. Think about it. It was 13 years ago. What matters is now. Okay? Yes, everybody has a livid past. Let's clear that up right now from Firm's point of view. Truth, facts, reality, and common sense. Okay? That's it. The past is the past. However, if it does seem to continue into a person's life, we're not singling out Mr. Platner on that. There's many of us out there with livid pasts. That doesn't mean we have to air out dirty laundry just to prove our point. From Firm. But where was Platner? Living in Washington, D.C. 13 years ago. Going to college, living in the nation's capital, working a normal job as a bartender at the Tune Inn on Capitol Hill. Platner then in 2014 was 29, praising Hamas, a raid that killed Israeli soldiers, called it a damn fine thing, looking and successful raid, and said he dug it, where I dig it. Same place, as a bartender in Washington, D.C. Yeah, so what? So far? But then he returns to Maine. In 2016, said the darkness started. He withdrew from college, left the military, came back to Maine for PTSD treatment. It started in 2017. He said this is when the worst stuff came out. He got older and became a communist. Called cops bastards. Said white rural Americans actually are racist and stupid. But where was he? An oyster farmer. Member of the Sullivan Planning Board. 3 years into PTSD treatment. Okay? Building a relationship that led to his 2024 marriage not long ago. Not isolated. Serving in local government, running a business, getting professional help. The timeline doesn't fit. We'll tell you our sources that we got this from, folks. Quite reliable. The darkest post came after he was established in Maine. He was getting treatment after he was building community connections and after he was serving on the planning board in Sullivan. That's not untreated PTSD, and that's not isolation. That's a guy in his mid to late 30s posting inflammatory stuff on the internet while holding local government positions. He's already apologized for that. Says he's changed. It's not who he is today. But going on with the timeline here, folks, as we look back on Mr. Platner, as firm explores three candidates, but number one today is Graham Platner. Too much information or not enough accuracy? Platner had made his military service, his veteran status, and working class oyster farmer identity the centerpiece of his Senate campaign, so prove it, Mr. Platner. Release records. And here's just a brief rundown to get to the point, folks. Every veteran candidate releases their DD-214 when discharged from the military. He had all kinds of specialty awards and decorations. And the reason he left the Maryland Army National Guard in 2016, well, Mr. Platner, we need the DD-214. He claims 100% VA disability, and he's made it central in his working class narrative. His VA rating letter would show whether he had 100% scheduler or TDIU, total disability individual unemployability. Whether his rating is permanent and total or whether he's classified as unemployable, the effective dates of his ratings and whether his rating has ever been appealed, challenged, or reduced remains. If he's claiming you're unemployable, how are you running for U.S. Senate? While you're at it, Mr. Platner, release Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI records. Veterans with 100% P&T VA disability often qualify for SSDI as well. He's receiving that on top of the VA disability that would explain why he avoids income from the oyster farm? SSDI has strict income limits to present day. No more than $1,690 a month can you earn, or you lose your benefits. He campaigns as a working class oyster farmer, but there's no public record of showing he owns the farm. The ownership agreement that would show actually shows the oyster farm equity split between himself, Amy, wife, and Rob Cushman. How much you paid for the farm, if anything, whether the Cushman family has financial stakes on Rob's partnership, and any loans or grants used to acquire or operate the farm. There is no deed, no record of sale, no transfer documentation in the Hancock County Register showing he bought the farm from Jock Crothers. Release the other agreement, Mr. Graham Platner. Prove you own it. He worked in Kabul, Afghanistan in 2018 as a State Department security contractor for Constellus, successor company to Blackwater. You may have heard more in the news, folks. Then he came back to Maine and ran for Senate as the anti-war progressive. But his contract shows that his exact role and responsibilities, how long he worked there and how much they paid him, private military contractors usually in Afghanistan at that time made $100,000 to $200,000 in 2018, and his performance records as well. He chose to go back to Afghanistan in 2018 as a private contractor after leaving military service. Disillusioned, he said. So release that contract. Mr. Platner, show us what Blackwater's successor paid you. In other information revealed by these sources, which we will give you, folks, and also be posted in our comments section, his campaign was packaged by Fight Agency and Morris Katz, New York City political consultants. Bernie Sanders, as you may recall, endorsed Platner 11 days after he announced. He raised $1 million in 9 days. Okay. That's a lot of money in 9 days. Detailed campaign spending would show how much went to New York City consultants versus Maine operations. How much went to family members. We know that Amy gets $43,000 a year. How much is self-funded versus small donors? Any coordination with national progressive groups? What about that campaign spending, Mr. Platner? He left the Maryland Army National Guard in 2016 for PTSD treatment in Maine. The exit documents would show whether it was a medical separation versus voluntary separation, any administrative documentation, and whether he was discharged or chose to leave. I didn't know you had an option. Release the National Guard documents, Mr. Platner. Bottom line is this. Mr. Platner has made his military service, veteran status, disability, and working class oyster farmer story the reason Maine should send you to the U.S. Senate. Well, prove it. So far, not so good. Every claim he has made can be verified with documentation that you control, Mr. Platner. Release the records or admit you're hiding something. Other veteran candidates released their DD-214s, especially anyone who served in the military, including yours truly. Other business owners released their ownership agreements. Other Senate candidates released their tax returns. Why won't you, Mr. Graham Platner? After 3 days of exposing his $200,000 from his lawyer father, your business partner, whose family owns islands, your recruitment by the New York City political consultants, your $100,000 plus household income from campaign donations and VA disability, and your work for Blackwater Successor Company, your word isn't worth much anymore. The records will tell the truth. It's like we always talk about here, folks. Truth, facts, reality, and common sense. In conclusion, on these findings from our sources, release everything, Mr. Platner. The DD-214, your VA rating letter, your SSDI records, Social Security Disability. Release the Oyster Farm ownership agreement. Release your 2018 Constellus contract, eventually known as Blackwater. Release your tax returns, release campaign spending breakdown, release the National Guard exit documents, or admit you're not who you claim to be. Maine voters deserve transparency, folks. You're asking them to send you to the U.S. Senate, Mr. Platner? Prove you're fit for office. Release the records. This comes, ladies and gentlemen, from theworkingmanstruth.com. We'll supply the sources and links and websites, and also the Washington Free Beacon. Maybe you've heard of it. You can find that under freebeacon.com. Beacon is B-E-A-C-O-N. freebeacon.com. Enough said, shall we say? Thank you for joining us here on Firm, folks. Mark Merrill, as always, back in the saddle again, as we say, doing better. Check out our programs anytime on YouTube, Twitter, and Substack. Pray for our state, pray for our candidates, and pray for our country, as we're still dealing, but may be close to coming to a settlement or a peace agreement permanently with Iran. Keep praying for that, folks, and our president. As always, stay safe and peace to all.